All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government.
In Reagan's view, the federal government had become so heavy-handed, so commandeering, so authoritarian over the states, that the American people needed a little history lesson and an indication of just where the new president stood. Well, Reagan was right. The 13 colonies that fought the Revolution and won the Revolution and wrote the Constitution all preceded the federal government. They voluntarily associated with each other in order to form the new government. In one moment of victory from England, the colonies became states. The states were sovereign. They were nation states. They were as independent from each other as they were from England after the Revolution. They had their own governments, their own militias, their own courts, and their own representatives to the other states. When the 13 colonies that had become states enacted the Constitution and voluntarily agreed to form the new government, they gave away some of their sovereignty: the right to coin money, the right to raise a military, the right to run a post office, the right to engage in foreign relations with other countries, the right to operate a national court system. All of this went to the feds. But the states retained for themselves what lawyers and judges call the police power. The police power does not refer to police as in cops and sheriffs. It refers to the right and power of the states to legislate for the health, safety, welfare, and morality of the people in the states. That is the core of the power retained by the states under the Constitution. As other territories joined the Union, from Florida to Louisiana, from Maine to Texas, from California to Alaska, they each gave to the feds the powers that they formerly had that were federal in nature, and they all retained for themselves the powers that were governmental in nature, the police power. The states also retained a veto of sorts over the growing federal government. Since the U.S. Senate, which is half of the Congress, consisted not of senators popularly elected as they are today, but of senators chosen by the state legislatures, the senators were, in reality, delegates from the states to the central government. When the Congress attempted to seize some of the states' police power, state regulation of health, safety, welfare, and morality, if the senators wanted to keep their jobs, they voted against such seizures. This was the genius of the federal system. The federal government regulated within its limited area. The states regulated within their limited area. The senators and fidelity to the Constitution kept the feds in check. All this changed after the Civil War. The folks who ran the government after Lincoln's death demanded surrender of power from the returning southern states. The federal government was taken over by big government progressives, and slowly but surely, power began to flow from each state to Washington, D.C. Progressives took over many state governments. The Constitution was amended in good ways to prohibit slavery, to compel equal protection, and to permit women to vote, and in bad ways to permit a federal income tax, to elect senators by popular vote, and to prohibit the sale of alcohol. So the states no longer had a check on federal power. The feds could now take money directly from those who worked the hardest. And the feds, who for 150 years had left individuals alone, began to tell folks what to eat, what to drink, how many hours to work, and what they should earn, even though the power to do all this was retained by the Constitution for the states. It gets worse. Do you ever wonder why speed limits and drunk driving rules are all uniform throughout the U.S.? This is clearly an area left for the states to regulate. How could they all have come up with the same rules? Well, they didn't. Congress bribed the states to change their laws. Here's how it works. Congress is filled with do-gooders who think they can write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event. So when they can grab power from the states, they will do so. But when the Constitution prohibits the power grab that the do-gooders want, they offer the states money and in return the states enact the laws that Congress wants. Thus, the Congress has said to the states, "We will give you hundreds of millions of dollars to repave your highways if you lower the speed limits to where we want them." Bingo! The states take the money, Congress gets its way, and more power flows from the states to Washington. One of the beauties of our federal system was the difference between the states. If you didn't like the taxes in Massachusetts, you could move to New Hampshire. If you objected to all the pervasive government in New Jersey, you could move to Pennsylvania. As President Reagan once put it, you could vote with your feet. This is no longer true. The Congress has so usurped power from the states via legislation and outright bribery that you can hardly tell the difference from one state to another. Will we ever return to the freedom and the choices we once enjoyed?